The blood on Sarah's hands wasn't hers. She stared at the crimson stains seeping through the white cotton bandages wrapped around the stranger's chest, her heart hammering against her ribs. The Apache man's dark eyes flickered open, meeting hers with an intensity that made her breath catch. Outside, the Arizona wind howled through the canyon walls, but inside her small cabin, time seemed frozen. "You saved me," he whispered, his voice rough as desert sand. Sarah pulled her hands back, suddenly aware of how close she'd been leaning. "You were bleeding to death on my doorstep. What was I supposed to do?" The man tried to sit up, wincing. "Most white women would have let me die." "I'm not most women." The words came out sharper than she intended, carrying 30 years of rejection, 30 years of being told she wasn't enough. He studied her face with those penetrating eyes. "No, you're not." 3 days earlier, Sarah had stood in the general store while Mrs. Henderson whispered loud enough for half the town to hear. 30 years old and still unmarried. What rancher wants a barren woman? She's nothing but damaged goods. Sarah had gripped her shopping list until her knuckles turned white, pretending the words didn't slice through her like a blade. She'd walked out with her head high, but inside, something had crumbled a little more. Now, watching this wounded stranger struggle to breathe, she felt something different stirring in her chest. Purpose, maybe, or just the simple relief of being needed. "What's your name?" she asked, adjusting his bandages. "Joseph." He paused, watching her reaction. Joseph Running Bear. Sarah's hands stilled. She'd heard that name whispered in saloons and trading posts. The Apache who'd lost his wife and children to smallpox 2 winters ago. The man who'd turned his back on his tribe's ways and now lived alone in the mountains. "I know who you are," she said quietly. "Then you know I'm dangerous." Sarah met his gaze steadily. "So am I." For the first time since she'd found him bleeding on her porch, Joseph smiled. It transformed his entire face, softening the hard lines carved by grief and survival. Over the next week, as Joseph's strength returned, Sarah discovered he wasn't the savage the townspeople whispered about. He spoke 3 languages, could read and write better than most men in Tombstone, and had gentle hands that could coax life from the most stubborn desert plants. "Why do you live alone out here?" he asked one evening as they sat on her porch, watching the sunset paint the mountains crimson. Sarah's fingers traced the rim of her coffee cup. "Because alone is easier than being reminded every day that you're not what people want." "And what do people want?" "A wife who can give them sons. A woman who can build a legacy." Her voice cracked slightly. "I can't give anyone children, Joseph. The doctor in Phoenix made that clear enough." Joseph was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his words were measured, careful. "My wife gave me 2 beautiful children, a son and a daughter." Sarah's heart clenched. "I'm sorry for your loss. They're buried in the mountains where the wildflowers bloom every spring." He turned to look at her. "I loved them more than life itself. But they're gone, and I'm still here. Don't you want to try again, to have more children?" Joseph shook his head slowly. "I want a partner, someone to share the sunrise with, to talk to when the nights get too quiet. Someone who chooses to be with me, not because I can give her children, but because she wants to build something different." Sarah's breath caught. Something different. A life based on choice, not expectation. On love, not obligation. And the words hung between them like a bridge neither was sure they should cross. That night, Sarah lay awake, staring at the ceiling. For 10 years, she'd believed her worth was tied to her ability to bear children. Every rejection, every pitying look, every whispered comment had reinforced that belief until it became her truth. But Joseph saw something else when he looked at her. He saw a woman who'd risked everything to save a stranger. A woman who'd built a life on her own terms in the unforgiving desert. A woman who was complete exactly as she was. The next morning, she found him in her garden, carefully tending to the tomato plants that had been struggling in the harsh sun. "You don't have to do that," she said. "I want to." He looked up at her, dirt smudged on his cheek. "If you'll let me stay, I want to help you build something here." Sarah's heart hammered. "Stay?" Joseph stood, brushing the dirt from his hands. "I'm asking you to be my wife, Sarah, not because I need children, but because I need you." The words she'd never thought she'd hear hung in the morning air, but fear crept in alongside the hope. "The town will never accept us," she whispered. "Then we'll make our own acceptance. Your people will understand that love doesn't follow the rules others set for us." Sarah looked around at the life she'd built alone. The small cabin, the struggling garden, the endless quiet that had been both her refuge and her prison. "I don't know how to be a wife," she admitted. Joseph stepped closer, his eyes warm. "I don't know how to love again after losing everything. Maybe we can figure it out together." Before she could lose her courage, Sarah reached for his hand. His fingers were warm, calloused from work, steady in a way that made her feel anchored. "Yes," she whispered. The smile that spread across Joseph's face was like watching the sun rise over the desert, full of promise and new beginnings. But as they stood there, hands clasped in the morning light, neither of them saw the rider approaching in the distance. Tom Bradley, the rancher who'd rejected Sarah's hand 3 times, was coming with news that would test everything they'd just promised each other. If you're loving this story of unexpected love and second chances, hit that subscribe button and let me know in the comments what you think Sarah and Joseph should do next. Your support means everything to this channel. And don't forget to hit that notification bell so you never miss these incredible true stories from the Old West. Tom Bradley's horse kicked up dust clouds as he approached Sarah's cabin, his face grim beneath his weathered hat. Sarah and Joseph were still standing hand in hand when they heard the hoofbeats, and something in the urgent rhythm made Sarah's stomach clench with dread. "Sarah!" Tom called out, dismounting before his horse had fully stopped. "You need to come with me, now!" Joseph stepped protectively in front of Sarah, his body tense. "What's your business here, Bradley?" Tom's eyes flicked between them, taking in their joined hands, the obvious intimacy of their stance. His jaw tightened. "This doesn't concern you, Apache." "Everything concerning Sarah concerns me now," Joseph replied evenly. Tom's face flushed red. "Is that so? Well, Sarah, I hope you're prepared for what you've gotten yourself into." He pulled a folded paper from his vest pocket. "There's a bounty on your boyfriend's head. $500 for Joseph Running Bear, wanted for the murder of 3 settlers near Tucson." Sarah felt the blood drain from her face. Joseph's hand tightened around hers, but he didn't deny the accusation. "That's impossible," Sarah said, but her voice sounded weak even to her own ears. Tom unfolded the wanted poster, holding it up. Joseph's face stared back at them, rendered in stark black ink. "Posted yesterday in every town from here to Phoenix. The territorial marshal is already on his way." Sarah turned to Joseph, searching his face for denial, for explanation, for anything that would make this nightmare disappear. But what she saw there made her heart sink. "Joseph," she whispered. He met her eyes, and she saw the truth in them before he spoke. "I didn't murder anyone, Sarah, but I killed them." The words hit her like a physical blow. Tom stepped forward, his hand moving to the gun at his hip. "Don't," Joseph said quietly, but there was steel in his voice. "Let me explain." "Explain what?" Tom snarled. "How you butchered 3 innocent people." "They weren't innocent." Joseph's voice was steady, but Sarah could see the pain flickering in his dark eyes. "They were the men who brought smallpox to my village, who sold infected blankets to my people, knowing what would happen." Sarah's breath caught. She'd heard whispers of such things, rumors of deliberate infection, but she'd never wanted to believe them. "They killed my wife," Joseph continued, his voice growing rougher. My children. 67 people in my village, including babies who never had a chance to take their first steps. So you took justice into your own hands, Tom said coldly. I took revenge. Joseph's honesty was brutal, unflinching. I tracked them for 2 years. When I found them, I gave them the same chance they gave my family. None. Sarah felt the world tilting around her. The man she'd just agreed to marry, the gentle soul who'd tended her garden and spoken of love, had killed 3 men in cold blood. Sarah, Tom said, his voice gentler now, come with me. I can protect you from this. The marshal doesn't need to know you are harboring him. Sarah looked between the 2 men, Tom representing everything safe and familiar and expected, Joseph representing a love she'd never dreamed possible, now tainted with blood and violence. How long do I have? She asked quietly. Sarah, no, Tom protested. How long? She repeated, looking at Joseph. The marshal will be here by sunset, Tom answered reluctantly. Maybe sooner. Joseph released her hand, stepping back. Go with him, Sarah. This isn't your fight, isn't it? She turned to face him fully. You asked me to be your wife. Doesn't that make it my fight too? Not like this. Not when it could cost you everything. Sarah looked around at her small cabin, her struggling garden, the life she'd built in isolation. What exactly would I be losing? Tom stepped forward urgently. Your reputation, your safety, your future. Sarah, be reasonable. You barely know this man. I know enough. Sarah's voice was stronger now, more certain. I know he saved my life by giving it meaning. I know he sees me as I am, not as what I lack. And I know that love isn't always clean and simple. Love? Tom's voice was incredulous. Sarah, he's a killer. So are you, Sarah shot back. How many Apache have you killed, Tom? How many Mexicans? How many men who stood between you and what you wanted? Tom's face darkened. That's different. That's war. That's protecting what's ours. And what Joseph did wasn't? Sarah's voice rose. Those men murdered his family, Tom. They committed genocide and called it business. The law doesn't see it that way. The law. Sarah laughed bitterly. The same law that says I'm worthless because I can't bear children. The same law that would let those men profit from mass murder as long as they only killed Indians. Joseph watched this exchange with growing amazement. This woman, this incredible woman, was defending him even knowing what he'd done. Sarah, he said softly, you don't understand what you're choosing. She turned to him, her eyes blazing with determination. I'm choosing you. I'm choosing us. I'm choosing to build something real instead of hiding behind what's safe. Tom made a sound of disgust. You're throwing your life away for a savage who'll be dead by morning. Get off my land, Sarah said coldly. Sarah, now. Tom stared at her for a long moment, then shook his head. When this goes bad, don't come crying to me. He mounted his horse and rode away, leaving dust and silence in his wake. Sarah and Joseph stood facing each other in the sudden quiet. You could have gone with him, Joseph said. I could have done a lot of things. Sarah stepped closer to him. I could have married Tom Bradley 5 years ago and spent my life pretending to be grateful for scraps of affection. I could have moved back east and become some old man's housekeeper. I could have given up and died alone in this desert. And instead, I'm going to help my husband escape a marshal's noose. Joseph's eyes widened. Husband, Sarah smiled, and it was fierce and beautiful. We don't have time for a proper ceremony, but I don't need a preacher to tell me what I already know. You're mine, Joseph Running Bear, and I'm yours. Joseph crossed the distance between them in 2 strides, pulling her into his arms. When he kissed her, it tasted like promises and desperation and hope all mixed together. We need to run, he murmured against her lips. I know. Sarah pulled back to look at him. I have money hidden away, supplies. We can be in Mexico before the marshal reaches town. You'd give up everything for me? Sarah looked around at her small, lonely life one last time. "I'm not giving up anything, Joseph. I'm finally choosing everything." As the sun began its descent toward the horizon, Sarah and Joseph loaded their horses with supplies and precious few belongings. They would ride south, toward the border, toward a future that was uncertain but theirs to build together. The last thing Sarah did before they left was place a letter on her kitchen table addressed to Tom Bradley. In it, she wrote, "Some things are worth more than safety. Some love is worth more than acceptance. I choose the dangerous path because it leads to something real." As they rode into the gathering dusk, Sarah felt something she'd never experienced before. The terrifying, exhilarating freedom of choosing love over fear, passion over security, truth over comfort. Behind them, dust clouds on the horizon marked the marshal's approach. Ahead of them lay the unknown, but beside her rode a man who saw her worth, who chose her not despite her perceived flaws, but because of her strength. And for the first time in her 30 years, Sarah felt truly alive. The story continues to unfold as Sarah and Joseph face the ultimate test of their newfound love. Will they escape to freedom, or will the past catch up with them? And what other secrets might surface as they fight for their chance at happiness? Don't forget to subscribe and hit that notification bell, because you won't want to miss how this incredible love story unfolds. Drop a comment below and tell me, would you risk everything for true love? Your engagement helps this channel grow and brings you more amazing stories from the American frontier. Hit that like button if this story has you on the edge of your seat. The Mexican border shimmered like a mirage in the distance, but Sarah could hear the thundering hoofbeats behind them growing closer. Her horse was lathered with sweat, sides heaving as they pushed through the rocky terrain of the Sonoran desert. Joseph rode beside her, his dark eyes constantly scanning the landscape for cover, for escape, for any chance of survival. "There," he pointed toward a cluster of red rocks jutting from the desert floor. "We can lose them in the maze." Sarah's heart pounded as they veered toward the formation. The rocks rose like ancient sentinels, carved by wind and time into a labyrinth of narrow passages and hidden caves. They dismounted quickly, leading their horses into the shadows, just as the marshal's posse crested the hill behind them. 6 men, Joseph whispered, peering through a gap in the rocks, all armed. Sarah checked her rifle, surprised by how steady her hands were. 3 days ago, she'd been a spinster living alone in the desert. Now she was an outlaw's wife, running for her life with a loaded weapon in her hands. "Marshal Garrett," Joseph identified the lead rider. "He's got a reputation for bringing in his bounties, dead or alive, usually dead." "Then we make sure he doesn't find us," Sarah said firmly. They worked together in silent coordination, leading their horses deeper into the rock maze. The passages were narrow, barely wide enough for a horse, but they provided perfect cover. Joseph's knowledge of the desert and Sarah's practical mind made them a formidable team. "This way," Joseph indicated a passage that seemed to lead nowhere. "There's a hidden spring. We can rest the horses and wait them out." But as they emerged into a small circular clearing, surrounded by towering rocks, they found they weren't alone. An elderly Apache woman sat beside a small fire, her weathered hands working on a piece of beadwork. She looked up at them with eyes that seemed to hold the wisdom of centuries. "Grandmother?" Joseph said respectfully, using the traditional greeting. The woman studied Sarah with interest. "So this is the white woman who chose love over safety." Sarah blinked in surprise. "You know about us?" "News travels fast in the desert, child, especially news of Joseph running bare, taking a wife." The old woman's eyes twinkled. "I am Maria Singing Crow. I knew Joseph's mother." Joseph dismounted and approached her with reverence. "Grandmother, we're being hunted. We don't want to bring danger to you." Maria waved dismissively. "At my age, danger is just another word for interesting." She gestured for them to sit. Besides, the marshal and his men rode past here an hour ago. They're searching the eastern passages. Sarah felt some of the tension leave her shoulders. How did you know we'd come this way? Because this is where all lost souls eventually find their way. Maria's smile was enigmatic. The spring here is sacred. It has been a place of healing for my people for generations. Joseph knelt beside the old woman. Grandmother, I've brought shame to our people. I've killed in anger, not in defense. Maria's expression grew serious. You killed the men who murdered your family. Yes, and now you run with a woman who chose you over her own safety. Yes. Maria nodded slowly. Then you have learned something important. Revenge may satisfy the heart temporarily, but love heals the soul permanently. She turned to Sarah. And you, child, you were told you were worthless because you could not bear children. Sarah's throat tightened. Yes, but you have given birth to something far more precious. You have given birth to your own courage, your own worth, your own choice to love without condition. The words hit Sarah like a revelation. She had spent so many years defining herself by what she couldn't do, what she couldn't give, what she couldn't be. But in choosing Joseph, in choosing this dangerous path, she had discovered who she truly was. The marshal will not give up easily, Maria continued. He has a reputation to maintain, but there is another way. Joseph leaned forward. What do you mean? The men you killed, Joseph. They were not just murderers. They were part of a larger conspiracy, men in high places who profit from the suffering of my people. Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. What kind of conspiracy? Maria reached into her bag and pulled out a leather pouch. From it, she extracted several documents, yellowed with age but still legible. Contracts, she explained. Bills of sale, correspondence. Proof that the territorial government has been deliberately spreading disease among Apache villages to clear the land for mining companies. Joseph's face went pale. How did you get these? My grandson works as a translator for the territorial office. He has been gathering evidence for years, waiting for the right moment to expose the truth. Sarah examined the documents, her hands trembling. The papers detailed a systematic plan to eliminate Apache populations through biological warfare, disguised as trade agreements and peace offerings. These men you killed, Maria continued, they were just the foot soldiers. The real criminals wear suits and sit in government offices. Why are you showing us this? Sarah asked. Because you have a choice. You can continue running, living as fugitives for the rest of your lives. Or you can help us expose the truth and clear Joseph's name in the process. Joseph shook his head. It's too dangerous. If these men have government backing, then they also have enemies, Maria interrupted. There are good people in positions of power who would be horrified to learn what's being done in their name, people who would ensure justice is served. Sarah looked at the documents, then at Joseph, then back at Maria. What would we need to do? There's a federal judge in Tucson, Judge Harrison. He's an honest man who has been investigating corruption in the territorial government. If these documents reached him, along with Joseph's testimony about what really happened to his village, the men I killed would be seen as the criminals they were, Joseph finished. And you would be seen as a man who sought justice for genocide, Maria nodded. Sarah felt hope stirring in her chest, but fear came with it. What if it doesn't work? What if they just bury the evidence and hang Joseph anyway? Maria's eyes grew sad. Then at least the truth will have been spoken. Sometimes that's all we can do. Joseph stood and walked to the edge of the clearing, staring out at the desert. Sarah followed him, placing her hand on his arm. What are you thinking? She asked softly. I'm thinking that I've spent 2 years running from what I did. Maybe it's time to stop running and start fighting for what's right. It's dangerous. Joseph turned to face her, his eyes intense. Everything worthwhile is dangerous, Sarah. You taught me that when you chose to save my life, when you chose to marry me, when you chose to run with me. Sarah felt tears prick her eyes. "I'm scared." "So am I." Joseph cupped her face in his hands. "But I'm more scared of living a lie than I am of dying for the truth." Sarah leaned into his touch, drawing strength from his certainty. "Then we go to Tucson." "We go to Tucson," he agreed. They returned to Maria, who was packing the documents back into her pouch. "You've decided," she said. It wasn't a question. "We'll take the evidence to Judge Harrison," Sarah said. "But how do we get to Tucson without being caught?" Maria smiled. "Leave that to me. I have friends who owe me favors. You'll travel as my grandchildren, returning from a trading expedition. No one looks twice at an old Apache woman and her family." Over the next hour, Maria transformed them. She braided Sarah's hair in the Apache style and gave her traditional clothing that would help her blend in. Joseph shed his white man's clothes for the buckskins of his people. "You look like yourself again," Sarah observed, admiring how the traditional dress seemed to restore something essential in Joseph's bearing. "I feel like myself again," he replied, "for the first time since I lost my family." As the sun began to set, painting the desert in shades of gold and crimson, Maria led them through hidden paths toward a small Apache camp. The people there greeted Joseph with a mixture of wariness and respect. His story had preceded him, and while some disapproved of his actions, others understood the pain that had driven him. "You have found a strong woman," observed an elderly man named Thomas Crow Feather. "She has the look of someone who has faced hardship and emerged stronger." Sarah felt a warmth spread through her chest. These people, who had every reason to distrust her, were accepting her as one of their own because she had chosen to stand with Joseph. That night, as they prepared to leave for Tucson, Sarah sat with Joseph under a canopy of stars, unlike anything she'd ever seen in town. "Do you regret it?" Joseph asked quietly. "Giving up your old life?" Sarah considered the question seriously. "I regret that it took me 30 years to find the courage to live authentically, but I don't regret a single moment since I found you bleeding on my doorstep. Even if this doesn't work? Even if we end up dead or in prison?" Sarah took his hand, intertwining their fingers. "Joseph, I spent 30 years being dead inside, just breathing and going through the motions. These past few days with you, I've been more alive than I ever thought possible. If we die tomorrow, I'll die knowing what it feels like to be truly loved and to love truly in return." Joseph brought her hand to his lips, pressing a gentle kiss to her palm. "I love you, Sarah Running Bear." The name sent a thrill through her. Sarah Running Bear. A woman who belonged somewhere, who was part of something larger than herself. "I love you too," she whispered. The next morning, they set out for Tucson disguised as Maria's family. The journey took 2 days, traveling slowly to avoid suspicion. Sarah marveled at how different the world looked when you were part of a community, when you had people who cared about your welfare and would risk their own safety to help you. When they finally reached Tucson, Maria led them to a small adobe house on the outskirts of town. "Judge Harrison lives here," she explained. "He's expecting us." The judge was a tall, thin man with kind eyes and prematurely gray hair. He listened intently as Joseph told his story, examining the documents Maria had provided with growing amazement and horror. "This is extraordinary," he said finally. "If this evidence is authentic, it represents one of the most heinous crimes ever committed by our territorial government." "It's authentic," Maria assured him. "My grandson risked his life to obtain these documents." Judge Harrison looked at Joseph with new understanding. "Mr. Running Bear, based on what you've told me and what these documents reveal, I believe you acted in justifiable defense of your people. However, the law requires a formal hearing." Sarah's heart sank. "A trial?" "A hearing," the judge corrected. "I have the authority to convene a special tribunal to review cases involving territorial corruption. If the evidence supports your husband's claims, I can issue a full pardon and order an investigation into the real criminals." "And if it doesn't?" Joseph asked. Judge Harrison's expression was grave. "Then you'll face trial for murder. But I give you my word that you'll receive a fair hearing, regardless of the outcome." Sarah and Joseph exchanged glances. They had come this far on faith and courage. They couldn't turn back now. "When?" Sarah asked. "Tomorrow morning. I'll need tonight to review all the evidence and prepare the proper documentation." That evening, in a small room behind the judge's house, Sarah and Joseph held each other close, knowing that the next day would determine their entire future. "Whatever happens tomorrow," Sarah whispered, "I want you to know that you gave me the greatest gift anyone has ever given me." "What's that?" "You showed me that I was worth choosing, that I was enough, exactly as I am." Joseph tightened his arms around her. "You showed me that love can heal even the deepest wounds, that it's possible to build something beautiful from the ashes of loss." The next morning, the hearing convened in Judge Harrison's courtroom. Word had spread through Tucson, and the gallery was packed with curious onlookers, including several prominent citizens and territorial officials who looked increasingly uncomfortable as the evidence was presented. Joseph testified with quiet dignity about the systematic murder of his people, about the infected blankets and deliberate spread of disease, about watching his wife and children die while the perpetrators counted their profits. When Maria's grandson took the stand and authenticated the documents, explaining how he had discovered the conspiracy, several men in the gallery quietly slipped out the back door. Finally, Judge Harrison called for a recess to deliberate. Sarah and Joseph waited in tense silence, their hands clasped tightly together. When the judge returned, his expression was solemn but determined. "After reviewing all the evidence presented today," he began, "this tribunal finds that Joseph Running Bear acted in justifiable response to acts of genocide committed against his people. The men he killed were not innocent victims, but active participants in a conspiracy to commit mass murder." Sarah felt her knees go weak with relief. "Furthermore," Judge Harrison continued, "I am issuing warrants for the arrest of all territorial officials named in these documents, and I am recommending a full federal investigation into the systematic persecution of Apache peoples." The courtroom erupted in chaos. Some cheered, others protested angrily, but Sarah only had eyes for Joseph, whose face showed a mixture of relief, vindication, and something that looked like peace. "Mr. and Mrs. Running Bear," Judge Harrison said, raising his voice above the commotion, "you are free to go. And may I say, your courage in bringing this truth to light has served justice in the highest sense." Outside the courthouse, Sarah and Joseph stood blinking in the bright Arizona sun, free for the first time since their journey began. "What now?" Sarah asked. Joseph smiled, the expression transforming his entire face. "Now we go home. We build that life we talked about. We plant a garden and watch it grow. Where is home?" "Wherever you are," Joseph replied, pulling her into his arms. As they kissed in the dusty street of Tucson, surrounded by the chaos of a changing world, Sarah realized that she had finally found what she'd been searching for her entire life. Not just love, but the courage to claim it. Not just acceptance, but the strength to define her own worth. She was no longer the barren woman no rancher wanted. She was Sarah Running Bear, wife to a man who had chosen her not despite her perceived flaws, but because of her strength, her courage, and her capacity for unconditional love. And that, she thought as Joseph spun her around in the street, was worth more than all the children she could never have, more than all the approval she had never received, more than all the safe choices she had never made. Sometimes the most dangerous path leads to the most beautiful destination. Sometimes love requires us to risk everything we thought we wanted for everything we never knew we needed. And sometimes Just sometimes, courage is rewarded with a happiness so complete it feels like coming home to yourself for the very first time. If this story of love, courage, and second chances moved you, I need you to do something right now. Hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell, because stories like this don't tell themselves, and your support is what makes this channel possible. Drop a comment below and tell me about a time you chose courage over comfort, love over safety. Share this video with someone who needs to hear that it's never too late to rewrite your story. And smash that like button if you believe that true love is worth fighting for. Your engagement doesn't just help this channel grow, it helps spread these powerful messages of hope and transformation to people who desperately need to hear them. Thank you for being part of this incredible community of storytellers and dreamers.